What's going on? Yeah, it's Tower number 9 here, and today we have another video with some gameplay footage from Star Wars Unlimited TCG. So this time I'm playing actually an Iden Versio red deck, and this is a league match against DestinyRiku, who is using Leia. We're both running Tarkin Town as our base, so let's see how this goes. And this Iden deck is actually one that was suggested. It was suggested to me by a viewer and someone else from the Star Wars Unlimited community. I believe it was Carbon from the Outmaneuver podcast. Had been playing this deck, thought it was really cool, and suggested that I try it out. So here we are. Um, so I'm gonna lead off here with Inferno 4, 2 cost 2/3 in space, and let you look at your top two cards. I see Palpatine and Relentless Raider. We're gonna send both of those to the bottom of the deck. That's really not what we want to see against an aggro deck like Leia Red. My opponent plays the old A-Wing, which is an aggressive card. So I'm thinking about what to do here. So this deck is a control deck, and it has a very strong late game. So this version, I believe there are 3 copies of Emperor Palpatine, 3 copies of. So I believe there are 3 copies of Emperor Palpatine, 3 copies of Dooku, 3 copies of Avenger, three Ruthless Raiders, just a lot of strong late game stuff. The problem is I'm playing against an aggro deck, so a lot of that powerful endgame stuff might not get a chance to see play here. And we're gonna see whether or not I can survive. So I play a cell block guard. First, I had Inferno 4 attack the A-Wing for 2, taking only 1 in return. My opponent plays Red 3. I play a cell block guard. I take initiative here, and my opponent uses Tarkin Town to clear my Inferno 4. So that was actually a bit of a misplay on my part, I believe. I had forgotten that my opponent had Tarkin Town, so my plan was to just attack with Inferno 4 to clear the A-Wing at the start of the next turn. Ultimately, doing it this way, forgetting about my opponent also having Tarkin Town meant that this A-Wing is going to get a chance to attack. It would have been better for me to use Tarkin Town on my opponent's A-Wing, but that's life. At least I've made my opponent use it, I suppose. I lead off with an open fire against Red 3, defeating that unit, and my opponent hits me for another 3 with the A-Wing. At this point, I'm going to use Iden to recover 1. So Iden's leader ability allows you to exhaust her to heal 1 from your base if you've defeated an enemy unit this turn. My opponent then plays a Bright Hope. I swing in for 3 damage to base with the Cell Block Guard. Opponent takes the initiative, and now I'm going to use Talk Town so that we don't see that A-Wing getting a chance to hit me for another 3 damage. So this Bright Hope is a 2/6 Sentinel in space, which is going to be a little difficult to deal with. However, my hope is that I can maybe take it out with Power of the Dark Side. This is going to be the 5 resource turn, which means that Leia is going to be able to deploy this turn, and Iden is going to have to wait until next turn. So my opponent will sort of get the jump on me when it comes to leader deployments. Thankfully, though, in this situation, Destiny plays an academy training on the Bright Hope. Now, in some cases, this would be a big problem. Academy training giving +2/+2 there, but because of this Power of the Dark Side, it actually ends up being very negative. So I play Power of the Dark Side, he has to choose and defeat a unit, and he loses that Bright Hope with the buff before it even gets a chance to attack. So next, Destiny deploys Leia. I'm going to attack the base with Cell Block Guard, since I think Leia will probably have to attack my guard anyway. That way I'm at least getting some damage in. Leia indeed attacks and defeats the guard. 3 damage there. I'm going to use Iden to heal 1 from my base. Destiny deploys a Battlefield Marine, 2 cost 3/3. I play Inferno, or no, actually, I force choke Leia there, defeating her and allowing my opponent to draw a card. But I just don't want Leia to be on the board there to swing in for another 4 and bring that Battlefield Marine in with her. And so now I have a bunch of small units. I have Inferno 4 that I can play this turn. I could potentially play Inferno 4 and 2 Viper Probe Droids this turn. My opponent hits my base for 3 with the Battlefield Marine. I'm going to go ahead and deploy Iden. So Iden is a 4/4 shielded, so she gets a shield token when she deploys. And when an enemy unit is defeated, you heal 1 as a passive. So my opponent plays another Battlefield Marine and K2SO. I have Iden defeat one of the Marines, healing one. I see a Rebel Assault and a Metal Ceremony in my opponent's hand with the Viper Probe Droid, and I'm just going to play out this whole hand. So we then play another Viper Probe Droid, and then we're going to play the Inferno 4 as well. Looking at my top two cards, um, oh, except I totally forget to use Inferno 4's ability. So I could have looked at my top two cards and chosen to put some on the top and some on the bottom. These cards are actually reasonably good, so I'm not sure I would have. Arguably, I could have put that Interceptor on the bottom of the deck, but hard to say. Okay, so I now have a bigger board than my opponent, and I have Iden to potentially provide me with some healing. I know, however, that my opponent has that combination with the Rebel Assault, potentially followed up by a copy of Metal Ceremony to buff the units that attack that turn. So that could be dangerous. Um, And so let's talk a little bit about Rebel Assault. This was a newly previewed card. It's a one-cost event in Command Heroism, and what it does is you can attack with a Rebel unit and it gets +1 power, and then you can attack with another Rebel unit and it gets +1 power. So in this case, my opponent swings in for 9 total damage with those two units, using the Rebel Assault for just all damage on the base. And what I'm going to do is use Iden to defeat the Battlefield Marine, which leaves Iden still on the board, although heavily damaged, and also heals 1. Destiny plays an Echo-based defender, which is a 4/3 Sentinel. Luckily for me, the probe droids are poised to remove it, and I have a probe droid trade with the Echo-based defender, also healing my base for 1. Destiny then plays the Metal Ceremony, giving +1/+1 to K2, but I play Power of the Dark Side, forcing him to discard K2 and healing my base for 1. He can then choose to either have me discard a card or do 3 damage. He chooses to do 3 damage. He then takes the initiative, and I swing in for 2 damage with Inferno 4 and another 3 damage with the Viper Probe Droid. And Destiny at that point concedes game 1, thinking that I have now stabilized and he is not going to have much of a chance after he sees whatever was in that hand. So I could have done at least, what is it? At least 9 damage that turn, maybe more, depending on what I drew. So now we're going to sideboard. So I'm going to bring in some cards from the sideboard that are here for anti-aggro. So we're bringing in Make an Opening, which is a removal and healing card. We have 2 copies of the System Patrol Craft, which should allow me better defense against my opponent's space presence. And we're going to eliminate some of the really expensive cards that I think it's just not very likely I'm going to be able to play. So 3 copies of Emperor Palpatine and 3 copies of Avenger are being sideboarded out just because this is against an aggro deck. It's going to be a fast game. I don't know if we get to that lead level of resources, I've probably already stabilized. And then, so I accidentally deal my opponent a vanquish there. And so then, because I want to remove 6 cards and I only have 5 cards sideboarding in there, I'm also going to bring in a Disabling Fang Fighter, which I think, maybe I can use the Disabling Fang Fighter on one of those Academy trainings or whatever. It's not necessarily crucial, but I think it will be better for me than a copy of Avenger or Palpatine, which I'm very unlikely to be able to play. At the very least, Disabling Fang Fighter actually trades evenly or favorably, depending on who gets to attack with some of those small rebel ships. So a Fang Fighter can attack and defeat an A-Wing while remaining alive, or can trade with a A-Wing on the defense, can also trade with Red 3 on either side. Okay, so we're going to go into game 2 here, and I have what seems like a pretty decent start. I can lead off with the Viper Probe Droid, follow up with Fifth Brother, potentially even buffing him with the Fallen Lightsaber. My opponent brings out a Battlefield Marine, and I'm going to go ahead with the Viper Probe Droid. So one of the reasons that the Viper Probe Droid is a good card, in my opinion, is not just for the looking at your opponent's hand, but also the fact that it's a 3/2 means that you have the ability to trade with early units that have 3 defense, like this Battlefield Marine. So if I had played Admiral Ozzel here, the Marine could defeat Ozzel while remaining alive, which is not where you want to be. That 3 power on the Viper Probe Droid puts it in a bit of a better spot. So I actually think currently, I like 3/2 units better than 2/3 units because against an aggressive opponent, the 3/2s are going to trade better with cards like Sabine Wren, Explosives Artist, or Battlefield Marine. So my opponent plays Admiral Akbar, which he just drew since we didn't see it with that reveal, and does 1 damage for each unit in the arena to one of my units. The 2 damage from Akbar is enough to clear that probe droid. And I'm going to respond by playing out Fifth Brother. So one thing that I could do here instead is I could use the open fire to clear that battlefield marine, preventing me from taking damage. But I wanted to get the Fifth Brother out. And I actually think in retrospect that was a mistake. I think it would have been better to just clear battlefield marine. So if I play the open fire, it kills the marine and I don't take any damage this turn. And then I can potentially play the Fifth Brother next turn or do something like that. The thing is, I don't really have a super awesome play to make with Fifth Brother. I could give him the Fallen Lightsaber, but it's slow, and I think probably what I should have done is either not played the Fifth Brother or given him the Fallen Lightsaber. I think that would have worked better. I also resourced a Forced Choke here, which I think was also wrong. I think that it would have been better for me to use that Forced Choke this turn. I can play it for only 1 thanks to the Fifth Brother. So I could Forced Choke I could potentially use the Forced Choke on that Battlefield Marine, and then still have still have 3 resources up to maybe play the Death Trooper afterwards or something. Hard to say. But I think that that wasn't the best use of my resources. The problem also, though, with playing the Fallen Lightsaber here is that because my opponent has Tarkin Town, even if I use the Fallen Lightsaber to do some damage but stay alive, I might still end up getting killed by Tarkin Town relatively quickly. So what I end up actually doing is I have the Fifth Brother trade with the Battlefield Marine and deal 1 damage to Akbar, setting him up to potentially be removed by my own Tarkin Town. But ultimately, that wasn't, I think, the highest value play I could make with Fifth Brother. And given that I didn't get great value out of Fifth Brother, it would have been better for me to use the open fire on the previous turn. Akbar then swings at my base for 1. I use Iden's ability to heal for 1. And Destiny plays K2 for 4. I do not love seeing K2 here. So what I'm going to do is open fire on K2 to clear him, and Destiny can choose to either make me discard a card or to deal 3 damage to my base. Ends up choosing discard a card, and I remove the Fallen Lightsaber, which I had not ended up playing. So now we're going into this next turn. Leia is going to deploy this turn. One good thing is that I've kept the amount of damage that I've taken this far low, but I don't have the presence on the board that I would most want to have. I end up resourcing the Fifth Brother here since he doesn't seem necessarily great. Opponent plays Leia, and I realize I'm in kind of an awkward spot. So I can play the Death Trooper to deal damage to Leia. I could The interceptor would be good if my opponent deploys a space unit, but I'm not seeing a space unit. I could do a make an opening to heal and reduce my opponent's attack, but it just doesn't do that much. So I end up using Tarkin Town to clear Akbar. That will prevent me from taking 1 damage and will allow me to also heal 1 this turn. My opponent then plays a spec force soldier. I think I'm going to go ahead and use Iden to heal here. I'm sort of hoping my opponent plays a space unit, which I can counter with Interceptor, which is kind of a better play than what I currently have available. Although right now I can at least use Death Trooper to kill the Spec Force Soldier. So my opponent swings in for 4 with Leia. I'm going to play the Death Trooper, defeating the Spec Force Soldier and dealing 2 damage to the Death Trooper himself. This, of course, sets the Death Trooper up to be killed by Tarkin Town. My opponent plays an Echo Base Defender. I'm going to just go ahead and take the initiative here, and my opponent uses Tarkin Town to clear my Death Trooper. So not really the finest turn. And then we also see a Medal Ceremony giving an experience to Leia, which I do not love to see. Do not love to see that at all. Okay, so we're getting some relevant cards here. So I have a takedown that I can potentially use. So right now the big issue here is that my opponent can attack with Leia, inflicting 5 damage, and then bring in the Echo Base Defender as well for another 4 damage. That's 9 to my base. Really not what I want to have happening here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just immediately play Takedown to clear the Echo Base Defender. This will also allow me to use Iden's ability to heal. My opponent plays Small Sabine. I use Iden's ability to heal. Leia can swing in for heavy damage on my base here, unfortunately. We actually see an academy training played on Leia. I deploy Iden. So Leia now has +3/+3 total. So she's going to be hitting for a mighty 7 on offense here. I have Iden defeat Sabine, healing my base for 1, and my opponent takes the initiative. So I'm thinking, maybe I can play out the cell block guard to at least delay Leia from attacking my base. I have Count Dooku who I can play, but his effect would not actually remove Leia since she isn't damaged. I think I probably should have swung Iden into Leia instead of into Sabine on that previous turn. My opponent plays a Battlefield Marine. I'm going to go ahead and bring out the Cell Block Guard, but my opponent immediately plays Admiral Akbar and kills the Cell Block Guard. Really not what I want to see. Um, so then I don't really have an answer to Leia. She's going to get to attack my base this turn. I have Iden kill the Battlefield Marine and heal my base, but Leia then hits me for 7, and I am left just taking the initiative. And I think I am really done for here, which is unfortunate. But I've kind of mismanaged this game. I think my acts in the mid game were not optimal, and I think that later on, it also seemed to me that I think I could have played this later situation better as well. By prioritizing doing damage to Leia, even if it doesn't immediately kill something, I would have been able to use Count Dooku to remove her. And my opponent damages me heavily with Leia and then plays for a cause I believe in to finish the game. So that one is unfortunately going to be a loss. I think I kind of botched that one up in the mid game and later game in terms of that. The situation with Fifth Brother, I didn't get maximum value there, and then I didn't do a good job of handling Leia either. Um, you know, there are things that you could say like, "Oh, you didn't draw Power of the Dark Side. That could have been really good." It could have been good, but at the same time, I also feel that I personally was not playing it as well as I could, and I think it's more useful like just in general when you're thinking about a game that hasn't gone your way. I think it's better to be focused most of the time on things that you did wrong and not ways the draws went wrong, if that makes sense. I think that there's a tendency for players to blame luck probably more than they should. I'm not saying it's never luck. I've had games that I've lost due to luck, and I've had games that I've won due to luck. Um, but players tend to blame luck more than they should, especially when losing. I think it's useful to focus more on your own decisions, and I think my own decisions didn't put me in a good position to deal with that layout. So ultimately, a win for Destiny. I changed my sideboarding a bit here by including the extra Fang Fighters, I believe. And we lead off with a Viper probe droid that reveals a hand full of space units. I think there was like a wing leader, an X-wing, an A-wing, and then another wing leader, or A-wing or X-wing or something. But it's tons of space stuff, which is not really what I most want to see. I'm thankful that I have these disabling Fang Fighters in there, though, since they'll at least be able to trade with my opponent's space units. Um, so we're going to go ahead and swing in for 3 with the Viper Probe Droid. My opponent plays a Wing Leader and buffs the A-Wing, and then I'm going to play the Disabling Fang Fighter and remove one of the experience from the A-Wing. I sort of knew that my opponent might be going for that Wing Leader play, so my Fang Fighter gets to at least limit the impact of the Wing Leader, even though it doesn't entirely eliminate it. I need to use my Fang Fighter here to get rid of my opponent's. I need to use my Fang Fighter here to get rid of my opponent's A-Wing, which is a gigantic threat in my opinion. Um, yeah, so we'll see how this goes. The Fang Fighter is a 3/2, so cannot defeat the A-Wing on its own, and does get defeated as well thanks to the experience on that A-Wing, but it sets up my opponent's A-Wing to be removed by Tarkin Town. Now we see Leia's ability used, so both those units get to attack, inflicting a mighty 6 damage. Tarkin Town is then going to remove the A-Wing. My opponent plays Red 3 as well, which I do not love to see. I'm going to use Iden's ability to heal 1 damage to my base. My opponent plays a Spec Force soldier, and I trade my probe droid for it because I am the control here, not the beatdown, and I'm trying to keep the board small. And then I'm going to play a system patrol craft. Really glad to have sideboarded that in. It's going to provide more of a barrier to my opponent's space assault there. absorbing at least one attack or allowing me to attack and clear out some of these units. So System Patrolcraft on the field, and we're going to continue here and see what we can do. I'm probably gonna like I may make my own version of this deck, and I think I'm likely gonna remove Fifth Brother, who I really just don't like that much, but could be a personal preference thing. Might well be wrong. I have the System Patrolcraft take out red 3 so that buff is not present for these other units. My opponent then uses Tarkin Town to remove the System Patrolcraft. Very logical play. I'm going to go ahead and play Make an Opening, another card that I'm glad to have sideboarded in. I heal 2 and give that Wing Leader -2/-2, defeating it. My opponent plays a Spec Force Soldier. I use Iden's ability for another point of healing. My opponent gives Leia Infiltrator's skill and then hits my base for 5. So Infiltrator's skill is an upgrade that gives +1/+1 and Saboteur. So that Leia is now a Saboteur and can get around any cell block guards I might play. We then also see For a Cause I Believe in, which I think hits for the full 4, and my opponent discards all the cards, since none of them are necessarily like reach type effects. Only 10 hit points left on my base, but I do get to deploy Iden this turn, and I have a few tricks in mind. I'm going to try to defeat Leia with Power of the Dark Side here. I have an I Am Your Father, but my opponent will just let me take the card draw and put the pressure on, so we're going to have to do a different route. I play Death Trooper and defeat the Spec Force Soldier. My opponent's running low on cards, ends up playing K2SO. So then all he has here is Leia, but Leia can swing for 5. So that's going to be another big chunk of damage on my base. And if I deal with that K2, he can deal 3 damage to my base when defeated as well. But luckily, I see a route here where I can clear my opponent's board and get a bit of healing. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to use Iden's ability to heal 1. Then my opponent hits me for 5. Then I'm going to deploy Iden and she gets a shield. My opponent takes the initiative. I'm going to have Iden defeat K2, losing the shield and healing another 1. My opponent then does 3 damage. And then I play Power of the Dark Side, defeating Leia as well and healing another 1 with Iden. So I went all the way down to 4 HP left on base there, but then recovered up to 5 HP. And I have Iden on the field and a Death Trooper while my opponent's board is cleared, and I also have a card advantage. However, my opponent is playing a deck that has some powerful reach cards. We've already seen a K2 and a For a Cause I Believe in, so some of that stuff has already been used, but with more For a Cause and similar, it could be a big problem. My opponent plays Akbar and defeats the Death Trooper. I use Iden to defeat Akbar and heal. Then my opponent plays an A-Wing, and I use an Open Fire to clear the A-Wing and heal. I then play Inferno 4, looking at my top 2 cards. I see an Admiral Ozzel, which I don't want, and I forget what the other card was, but it was something that I do want, so I'm going to keep that one. It was a Cell Block Guard, which will allow me to shore up my ground defenses a bit more. And so now I'm actually feeling pretty good. The main risk is my opponent getting a bunch of reach cards. I feel like it's going to be unlikely that my opponent is going to be able to get to a position of full advantage. Now, he is still resourcing, which is interesting. It might mean he's playing home 1 or something. We see General Dodonna hit the field. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to play this, make an opening, healing my base for 2 and giving Dodonna -2/-2. And that puts Dodonna at 2/2, which allows Iden to hit him, defeat him, and not take any damage. I think I might have forgotten a point of healing there with Iden. But then I'm also going to hit the opponent's base with Inferno 4 and play the Cell Block Guard to reinforce my ground arena. My opponent does have a For a Cause I Believe in here, and hits for 3 with the Infiltrator skill missing. Discards all those cards except for a Bright Hope, which is going to allow him to play a stronger unit in the space arena. I have a lot of damage that I can throw into the base here, so we see 3 damage to base with the Cell Block Guard. Opponent takes the initiative. I'm going to go ahead and play out the Viper Probe, seeing that my opponent's remaining card is an Academy Training. I then hit the base for 2, and then I'm going to swing in with Iden to hit the base for 4, and I'm going to play out one of the Fang Fighters in hand. It doesn't get to discard an opposing upgrade because there isn't one in play yet, but I know that if my opponent plays that Academy Train, I have another copy of the Disabling Fang Fighter waiting in hand to deal with it. So now we see my opponent playing Echo-based Defender. I'm going to trade my Viper Probe Droid for the Echo-based Defender. Bright Hope hits the field, and it's sort of an interesting scenario here. I'm going to play I Am Your Father for 7 damage to Bright Hope, unless my opponent says no, in which case I get to draw 3 cards. My opponent is kind of clinging to that Bright Hope as a potential answer, so it gives me the card draws, and the card draws show me another copy of Make an Opening. I'm going to debuff the Bright Hope to 0 attack, use my remaining units to clear it, heal 2. I missed another heal with Iden. There we go, there's the heal from Iden. And then I deal 7 damage to base with those units. I now have basically complete control, and my opponent concedes the game. So yeah, this blue-red control Iden deck actually seems quite cool. I think I would run it a little differently than this composition. I think there are a few changes that I would make. So I would I'm not a big fan of Fifth Brother. I'm not a big fan of Fallen Lightsaber. I might make some changes in that department. We'll have to see. Few other things I might mess with. I don't really love I don't love I Am Your Father, but it's better. It's probably better in non-aggro matchups, but I don't love that card. It's just a lot of the time if the aggro is really pressuring you, they'll just let you take the card draw and close out the game faster. So I'd have to test it more though. It can be useful in other games where if both options are good for you, I Am Your Father is cool. But I think it wasn't great, at least in this matchup. Overall, though, I'm quite happy with how the deck performed. And it was able to stand up to a potent aggro deck in terms of Leia Red. So yeah, I think Iden is a real contender. I know there are some people who really don't like Iden or think Krennic is always better or whatever, but I think Iden is a legitimate competitive build, and I look forward to testing out and playing with her more. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks to y'all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.